Well, here we have Royal Enfield 500 Bullet, which goes by the name of Asbo No2, and this is the one that I actually owned around 2008 and 2009, and not long after I bought it, it started making rather horrible grumbling noises from inside the engine, so I stripped it to rebuild it, and then decided while I was at it I'd have a go at tuning it using as many of the original parts as I could. And that was a story in itself, but basically what I did with it was I ported the head, I shortened the cylinder barrel, I lightened the crank, and generally I bumped the compression ratio up to initially probably around about 9:1, but that was with the original Indian piston in there, and not long after I did that, the crown of the piston broke off. So I got an acrylite forged piston and put that in then, but I didn't like the shape of the crown of that, so I rounded it off a little in the lathe, and that served me well. But a friend of mine decided he wanted to buy the bike, and a few months into his ownership it held its first piston. So I stripped the top end for him, and we fitted an American made 9:1 piston, but with barrel shortened, and I was running it without a head gasket as well, so we were 3mm short of what some of the engines are in barrel and head height. The compression ratio was pretty high on that, and more recently, after it changed hands again, it holds yet another piston, and we'll be seeing in some clips that I actually made before this one, but I'll tack on after this one. I'll be discussing some of the things that I did with it, and one of the main ones is I've retarded the inlet cam timing by 1 tooth, which I wasn't doing back in the day when I tuned this one. But this is the bike that actually coined the Asbo name, and although it's Asbo No2, the reason for that is I had tuned another one just prior to this one before I thought of the name, and once I'd thought of the name, thanks to this machine, the owner of the first one asked if he could have number 1, so I gave him number 1, and this is therefore number 2. And the story of the Asbo name itself came around because of I was parked in a shopping street in a nearby town, Llandudno, while I owned the bike, and I'd been into a hardware shop and bought a few bits and pieces, and I came out into the street to start the bike up, and there was people about in the street as you'd expect, and when it fired up, a few people looked round because it was quite noisy. Well, I'm naughty as well actually, but one guy actually jumped in the air and shouted and swore. And I made a comment on a forum that I was on, and I'm still on, Midland Bullet Riders, that if any bike ever deserved an Asbo, this was it. And that was it, the name was born, and that's where it came from, and this is the very bike. So hopefully before too long we might get a short test ride on it and see how it goes. But since I've rebuilt it this time, after holing another piston, it's holed 2 in total now, and lost the top off the first one before those 2. I have retarded the ignition timing by about 5 degrees. I've added a cylinder head gasket 1mm thick, a solid copper one, to knock the compression back to probably about 9.5:1, and I've retarded the inlet cam timing by a tooth, so the cylinder pressure is lowered, and I've also raised the carburetor needle and fitted a larger main jet. So I'm hoping between all those things it should certainly be a few big steps in the right direction of looking after the piston. And the sharp-eyed among you might notice that there's a fuse holder there that's split, and that is because I found the ignition switch is useless, so I've been taking the fuse out when I've needed to isolate the battery, but that's no biggie. It's just hot wired through the fuse holder there. As soon as I put a fuse in and connect up, we've got ignition and lights. So I'm just waiting for the owner to tax this machine, and once he's done that, we'll have our first ride on this, because I wasn't making videos when I owned and tuned this bike, so we've got no video footage of this one at all really on the road, so that'll be something to look forward to very soon, I hope, all being well. This Indian Enfield 500 is one that I used to own in the late 2000s, and I tuned it myself, and it actually is the machine that coined the Asbo name. And it would have been about 2008, 2009 I think I had it, and I bought it as a winter knockabout, and it turned out that it was not in the best of health mechanically, so I decided to pull the engine apart, and that is basically where I started doing my tuning work and seeing what I could do with it without buying expensive parts. So I shortened the cylinder barrel by 2mm and I ported the head. I did various other things to it that I thought might be a good idea at the time, and the result went very well indeed. So well that a friend of mine pestered and pestered me to sell it to him, so I did. So it went well. It coined the Asbo name, although it's Asbo No2. Another machine retrospectively got the #1 because I'd actually tuned that machine before I thought of the name, but the owner wanted it, so that's another story in itself. So this is Asbo #2, but it is actually the bike that penned the name. And it's been back. It's done this a couple of times over the years apparently, with a whole piston. So I sorted it all out and I put a new piston in it, cleaned up the mess and so on, and gone over it. But also this machine was tuned early enough in my career with these machines that I hadn't thought of or discovered that retarding the inlet cam timing by a tooth with standard cams made a big help. So I've also done that this time. On top of that, I found that the ignition timing was over advanced by about 5 degrees, and I've also raised the needle from its second highest position to its highest position in that McCuney carburetor, which is not something I would have chosen to have myself, but it was on it when I bought the bike. So I've raised the needle to its richest position, highest position, and I've also got a selection of main jets that I'm probably going to try in it as well. So with that and the inlet cam timing retarded a tooth to reduce the cylinder pressure, and a 1mm thick solid copper head gasket fitted where I didn't have one before, that's knocked the compression ratio back from about 10:1 to about 9.5:1 now. Hopefully all these things will combine and give the piston an easier life, I'm hoping. But at the moment the jetting in the carburetor is as it was and has always been since I first owned it, and I'm going to try and start it up now and just see whether it'll do that for us. So I'll put the camera down, and for the first time ever, if this goes well, we'll actually hear Asbo #2 running, because all I've had of this one so far is photographs, because it's from a period when, well, before I started making videos basically. So let's see what, if anything, we get, and well, we'll give it a try and see what happens, shall we? I don't know if anything will happen. Obviously it wasn't a runner when it came here. Let's just move a few things around here. Right then, some choke perhaps. This carburetor's got a lever choke, of course. Right then. I think we're going to have a look and see whether we've got any sparks. I don't think there's any life in the battery. So we'll come back to this shortly and I'll see where the sparks have gone. Right, take two with Asbo #2, and I found that I didn't have any sparks thanks to what appears to be a duff ignition switch. So I've basically hot wired it through a fuse to the battery to get live current from the battery straight to the bike and the ignition system and the lights and everything, and I'm ready to give it another try. It's amazing, you know, you get a whole piston, the thing must have been running in order to do that, and when it comes here to have it sorted out, you do that and then find you got no sparks because the ignition switch doesn't work. Mind boggles sometimes. Anyway, let's just put the camera down here and we'll see if we can make a little bit of noise with Asbo #2. Fired once. Choke. We're still hot wired. Doesn't want to go. Take the choke off. Didn't think anything was going to happen there for a moment. Right, I think I've got to attend to some mixture adjustments for sure. It's very slow to settle back down to a tick over, it would seem, after a bit of a throttle. But it's running, so that's good. I'm going to let it run for a while, get some oil circulated, and then I'm going to check one or two things. Who knows, might even be possible to go and have a ride on it sometime soon. There's the lights. But what a curved ball to throw in after a whole piston. Also somehow the gremlins come along and stuff the ignition switch up here. You just can't imagine or think up some of the things that sometimes jump out at you to try and foil you. But there we are, we got a runner, I'm happy with that. Oh well, that was one way of stopping it, I suppose. Right, well, I'm going to check a few things now. Check the oil level again and stuff like that. Go round it and then perhaps run it some more. Let the owner know it's a runner and possibly look at getting some testing in subject to jetting. They'll ride it very carefully to begin with. The slightest hesitation or sign of pinking and we'll be swapping jets and stuff. But at least I know I've got the ignition timing right. The compression ratio is a little lower than it was, and I've got that inlet cam retarded now, so hopefully we should be going the right way to get out the woods of this holing pistons thing it's been doing, all being well. Here I am with Asbo number 2 again, and I've been having a battle with the tick over being a bit erratic and up and down, and just seen a major contributory cause is that rubber dust seal on the choke mechanism. Whether you can see it or not, I'm going to try and hold some light there while I operate the lever. See, the rubber is coming up with the plunger and it's come off this little locating groove there, so it's holding the choke open or partly open all the time. So I need to get that rubber back down, clicked into its groove, and then the choke lever, the plunger, will return to the fully off position, and I might be in with a chance of getting a decent tick over on this thing. And I don't know how long that might have been like that, but that would have certainly affected the mixture one way or another as well, so I'm going to put that right next. Well, here I am back with Asbo number 2 again, and I've replaced that little seal on the choke plunger as it should be, so the choke plunger can close fully now into the off position. And it's just occurred to me, I've never really had to give this any thought before, but there's a horizontal passageway there that is an air passageway for the choke when it's in use. When the choke's open, it draws air through that horizontal passageway when the main throttle is closed, and draws fuel up from directly below to act like a miniature carburetor within a carburetor, if you like, for cold starting, which usually it does at its best with little or no throttle. Now, it's just occurred to me that with that dust seal dislocated and stopping the choke from going to its normal running position fully, the engine would have been able to draw extra air, especially at low throttle openings, small throttle openings, through that horizontal passageway and into the intake in front of the throttle slide. And it's quite possible that that extra air, which would have also reduced the vacuum on the main jet a little, it would have bypassed some of the vacuum, that in itself may be a contributory factor or even the cause of the whole piston. So I'm going to watch out for that very carefully as well. But on my first ride on this machine, I'm certainly going to be very vigilant for any slightest, even the slightest hints of any pinking. And I know that when I ride it, I'll film it, and the camera picks up pinking noises even when I can't hear them myself, and then when I play back the videos I can hear things that I don't hear when I'm on the bike. So that's going to be part of the plan. I'll probably fit one of the larger main jets as well, just as an extra precaution. So that's where we're at with that, and hopefully its days of holding pistons may hopefully be over.